How to Argue with a Cat. Chapter 7. Avoid Manipulation. The Magical Bookshelf. Logical Fallacies and Why They Fool Us. Up until now, we have covered the delightful ways to persuade cats and people. But one of the most important reasons to learn these tools is to keep from being persuaded ourselves. Unless we want to be persuaded. We cat owners often love it when a cat manipulates us. It puts things on an even footing, species-wise. Besides, what's the fun in having an ingenuous cat? You might as well have a dog. It is much less fun to be seduced by a fellow human, unless that human is a lover. Salespeople, marketers, and politicians use tricks that get us to buy things we don't want, or to spend money we don't have, or to live in terror of things that shouldn't scare us, or even to hate perfectly nice people and age-old religions. Persuasion is a dark art. If you want to make it less dark, shine a light on it. To stop those manipulators from having their way with you, you can learn two of their most facade words and fallacies. Both of them have to do with the logical part of rhetoric, or rather, the illogical part. The first tool messes with the definitions of words. A toy is a toy is a toy. One of the surest signs that a person lacks a clue is when he says, "Something's going on." You hear people say this in politics all the time. Something's going on. You also hear politicians talk about war when they don't really mean war. The war against the middle class. The war against white people. And then there's they. They are ruining our country. They are invading. You know what these words are? They're facades. Like the walls of the saloons and stores on a Western movie set, these words can look real. But look behind them, and there's nothing there. No meaning at all. The most powerful vaccine against facade words is a simple phrase. What do you mean by? When you hear someone say, "Something's going on," ask, what do you mean by something? And for that matter, what do you mean by going on? Has the something been going on for a while? Is the something increasing? What problems is that something causing? Same with war. A war is a serious thing. Many people die in them. Whole cities, even civilizations, can get destroyed. Sure, the middle class may be hurting. Another class may be hurting the middle class, or it might be corporations or trade agreements or whatever you believe, but have there been drone strikes? Boots on the ground? Prisoners taken? And anytime someone talks about a group of people as they, without being very specific, ask the question, who do you mean by they? The question serves as a cannonball knocking down the fake saloon front. Once you've done that, take a look at what the facade is made of. The word war is a metaphor. It plays pretend. Look at a field of grain and call it an ocean. You're pretending that the rippling stalks are waves. No harm in that. Nobody is going to try to float a boat on top of that wheat. But metaphors get nasty when people take them too literally. When someone defending the middle class against war starts talking about the enemy, you're in dangerous territory. Cats are much more sensible than we are about playing pretend. A cat toy is pretend prey. True, your cat might get carried away and try to eat it, but pretty soon she will come to her senses. A metaphor, in turn, is a kind of trope. Tropes are words that play pretend. One of the sneakiest tropes is one most of us haven't heard of. It's called the Synecdoche. A Synecdoche takes a part of a group and pretends it's the whole group. One immigrant commits a crime, and your nastier politician will pretend that immigrants are criminals. In the olden days, rich people all looked like one particular fat, cigar-smoking millionaire named Andrew Carnegie. People started calling him a fat cat. In some circles, that might be a compliment, but the term probably hurts some rich people's feelings, and many cats. Tropes are tricky things, even if you know how to pronounce them, but pronouns can be just as sneaky. The word they is a pronoun. This is where grammar can come in handy. A pronoun's home base is the word it stands for. That home word is the antecedent. When somebody uses a pronoun, it, they, them, search for the antecedent. Think whether a home word came before it. Say, immigration, immigrants. Then think about those immigrants and whether the speaker is making any sense about them. Our brains like to make connections between things. We see a few colors and assume a flag. We hear a few notes and can sing the rest of the song. This ability makes us brilliant. We can see a few rocks and imagine building a castle. It's why humans rule the world instead of cats. But that same trait can make us leap to wrong conclusions. We see a kind of tattoo and assume a gang member, or we hear an accent and assume a terrorist. Politicians play off this conclusion leaping. They use our leaping to manipulate us. Not so with cats. Being predators, they think more simply. If they fail to understand us, it's probably our fault. Man speaking to his lover. You're toying with my feelings. The cat hears toy and comes running. To a cat, a toy is a toy and not a trope. If all this makes you feel like a confused cat, try this remedy. If "what do you mean by" fails to clear things up, ask for details. Who exactly? How many? When? Who are these they? How many of them are there? Are their numbers growing? When did they get here? If that doesn't work, then ask for sources. You, where do you hear that? Think about these sources. Is it your great aunt who just joined Facebook, or a peer-reviewed science journal? Remember to ask for these three things. 1. Definitions. 2. Details. 3. Sources. The other person might find your questions annoying, but they can actually help him talk sense. Being forced to think about facts, definitions, and details can actually make a crazy-sounding person talk less crazy. Opponent. Okay, maybe not all immigrants. Maybe not even most of them. Tropes and pronouns fool people more than cats. Know what fools both species? Fallacies. The mistaken hiss. A fallacy is an argument that messes with logic. One fallacy gets committed when a cat makes an unreasonable assumption about another cat. A female cat, for instance, often dislikes other females. It's a territorial thing. But a female cat won't just resent other female cats. She will hiss and swipe at female humans as well. Humans do exactly the same thing. They see a fictional dark-skinned man commit a crime on television, and that makes them scared of every real dark-skinned man. A little kid throws a temper tantrum in a restaurant, and onlookers think, kids these days. The fallacy is the same for both cats and humans. It's called hasty generalization, making assumptions based on just one or two examples or characteristics. Why hasty? Because some carefully considered generalizations often turn out to be true, at least most of the time. For example, men are very bad at getting pregnant. This generalization seems to be true all the time. It's colder in the winter than in the summer. True most of the time. Women have higher voices than men. True much of the time. Anything measured with statistics is a generalization. If 4 out of 5 doctors like a particular brand of toothpaste, it's reasonable to think that doctors tend to like that toothpaste. But the tricky and sometimes evil side of hasty generalization comes when you're dealing with an individual. Statistically, women have weaker arms than men do. But that does not mean you're guaranteed to win an arm wrestling contest with every woman. Boys tend to like trucks more than girls do. Does that mean a girl who likes trucks isn't really a girl? Even a cat wouldn't make that mistake. A cat would totally know that a girl with a truck is still a girl. On the other hand, if you feed a cat at 4 in the morning, the cat will probably assume that breakfast should always happen at 4 in the morning. Cats are especially good at fallacies they like. A coincidence is not magic. Another fun and dangerous fallacy is the notion that when 2 things happen at the same time, that means one thing caused the other. One particular cat, his name has been withheld upon request, thinks that sitting on a particular bookshelf will make dinner time happen sooner. That's because he happened to jump on that shelf one time just when his human was getting ready for a date and served dinner early. The cat thought, I jump on the bookshelf and dinner comes. Therefore, jumping on the bookshelf makes dinner come. And so he set himself up for weeks of disappointment until he finally gave up the notion. He continued to jump up on the bookshelf an hour before dinner, only now it was just a habit. Many human superstitions start with this same fallacy. A baseball player wears uncomfortable underwear while hitting a grand slam. From then on, that same tight, hole-pocked pair of underpants becomes part of his uniform. This fallacy has a fancy name. It is a post hoc fallacy, from the Latin post hoc ergo propter hoc, which means after this, therefore because of this. People and cats commit this fallacy when they think that a correlation, one thing happening with something else, is a cause. Some parents resist getting life-saving vaccinations for their 2-year-olds because some kids get diagnosed with autism soon after they get their shots. Autism is detectable just about the same age that kids get their 2-year vaccinations. This leads a few parents to think that vaccinations cause autism, even though science has clearly proven they don't. The post hoc fallacy tends to hit us in subtle ways. A student parties all night and aces an exam. Conclusion: partying strengthens his mental faculties. Never mind that he was paying extra attention in class and had already read the material thoroughly. Or you go on holiday and it rains the entire week. I'm sorry, you say to the hotel manager, I made it rain. Even if you were slightly kidding, you were committing an easy fallacy. If, however, you really did make it rain, you should switch careers. Farmers would pay you good money. Close your eyes to make it go away. If you have seen a cat hide by putting her head in a box with her butt sticking out, you have witnessed a fallacy doctors often commit. It goes like this: if I can't see it, it doesn't exist. A cat will ignore something it doesn't like, with the healthy attitude that pretending it doesn't exist will make it more likely not to exist. When a doctor does that same thing, it isn't so healthy. He tells you that the tests were negative, therefore nothing is wrong with you. You still feel terrible, though. Something is wrong with you. The doctor commits the fallacy of ignorance, the belief that not knowing something proves it doesn't exist. It's always good to be skeptical of anything science hasn't proven. But, as a famous expression goes, absence of proof does not mean proof of absence. Science has not yet found intelligent life on other planets. Does that mean there are no smart and possibly furry aliens out there? There's a first for every cat. One of the many ways cats are smarter than humans is in cats' wise attitude toward antecedents. A cat will almost always be a little leery around a strange dog. Even fallacy of antecedent assumes that what happened before determines what happens after. Before the Civil War, many Americans believed that the states would never fight each other. Why? Because they never had. A tragic fallacy of antecedent. Now, look at your average self-respecting cat. He sees you walk by with a plate of food day after day without ever letting him sample the food. Does that mean you will never give him a bite? No! That's a ridiculous fallacy, and he will resist it by staring at you meaningfully every time you walk by. He will try different methods to persuade you to stop and let him have just a taste, or maybe a bite, or, if you're a true friend, all the meat on that plate. You can have the vegetables. A cat knows there is a first for everything. And before every first, there was a long stretch of time when it hadn't happened yet. People driving home from work on a Friday evening should think like wise cats. Many lives would be saved. The tail-chasing fallacy. Have you ever run across the word tautology? It's a kind of bad logic where the proof and the conclusion are the same. For all their brains and good rhetoric, some cats get tautological on occasion. Cat, I want to eat, says this with a pitiful high mew. You. Why? It's 2 hours before dinner. Cat. Because I'm hungry. Says this with a pitiful high mew. I want to eat because I'm hungry. The conclusion, I want to eat, is pretty much the same as the proof, I'm hungry. Another common cat tautology has to do with fun. Cat, I want the tinsel stick. Says this by looking meaningfully toward the cupboard where the stick is kept. You, really? We just played with it an hour ago and I have chores to do. What on earth do you want the stick for now? Cat, I want to play. Says this with a throaty meow and a meaningful look toward the cupboard. Not all tautologies are this obvious. Some of the human ones, especially those manufactured by advertisers and politicians, can be hard to spot. The cupcake diet lets you lose weight by shedding unwanted pounds. Sure, you could shed wanted pounds by cutting off your own leg, or more reasonably, you could shed muscle, but unwanted pounds just means fat. And when most people think of losing weight, they imagine losing fat. So the cupcake diet lets you lose fat by shedding fat. That's a tautology. A cat would find it ridiculous, unless the cupcake was made of tuna. If it has claws, it's a fallacy. Here's a very different kind of fallacy. It has to do with biting. When a cat tries to persuade you by biting your arm or clawing your leg, it's actually committing a fallacy named by Aristotle himself. Which, when you think about it, is pretty impressive. Aristotle called this kind of fallacy argument by the stick. Presumably, he was not thinking about cats at the time. Otherwise, he might have called it argument by the claw. What makes it a fallacy? A legitimate argument tries to convince someone to make a willing decision. An argument by the stick, therefore, is not an argument, but a fight. As you have seen, a successful argument makes an audience want to do something. Violence, or a threat, makes people do things unwillingly under duress. By the way, notice how we said threat as well as actual violence? Both count as the same fallacy, argument by the stick, because a threat can force people to do things they don't want to do, just as actual violence can. In other words, a hissing cat commits the same fallacy that a biting cat does, only less painfully. Cat wisdom. Biting is a last resort. In rhetoric, violence is the only real fallacy. Sure, a nip on the ankle can get you attention, but a chomp ruins the conversation.